Brutality. If there's one word that underpins Russia's approach to the Ukraine war, it would be brutality. Putin's regime has relied on a meat grinder approach that has cost Russia's army close to 800,000 people. It's according to Ukraine's Ministry of Finance. And nothing has changed with the arrival of North Korean soldiers in the Kursk region. If anything, these new soldiers face a level of brutality that no other troops have experienced so far during the war. Brutality so severe that they're executing their own just to prevent them from being captured alive by Ukraine's forces. But what is actually happening among the North Korean troops currently taking part in Putin's counteroffensive in Ukraine? And why are those soldiers executing their comrades? We answer those questions in this video, starting with the execution claims. Toward the end of December 2024, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky made the remarkable claim that North Korean soldiers are brutally executing their own to prevent them from being captured by Ukrainian forces. Worse yet for Ukraine, the few North Koreans it has managed to capture have been so severely injured that they couldn't be resuscitated. They died before Ukraine could extract any information from them. Everything is arranged in a way that makes it impossible for us to capture the Koreans as prisoners, Zelensky claims. Their own people are executing them. There are such cases, adds Ukraine's president before he points out that Russia is sending North Korean soldiers into assaults against Ukrainian positions with minimal protection. Zelensky also says that those few North Koreans who are captured seem to have been wounded by their own people to prevent them from talking. Today, we received reports on several soldiers from North Korea. Our warriors managed to capture them, but they were seriously wounded and could not be resuscitated. Zelensky goes on to call what's happening one of the manifestations of madness of a dictatorial regime. The implication is clear. Putin doesn't care about the North Korean troops he's sending to Kursk. They're just more meat to feed into his grinder, with those troops being so vulnerable that they see no other way out of the fight than to die. It makes little difference whether those deaths comes at Ukrainian hands or their own. This isn't to say that Ukraine has been wholly unsuccessful in capturing North Korean soldiers. Toward the end of December, news emerged that Ukraine had managed to capture its first soldier from the country. This is the first in a string of captures and killings, claimed Asan Institute for Policy Studies research fellow Yang Uk. For Ukrainians, it's more beneficial to capture these North Korean troops and try to exchange them with Russians for Ukrainian prisoners of war. Only those exchanges aren't happening. As the BBC reported on December 27th, the first captured North Korean soldier died while in captivity. The soldier's injuries were too severe, leading to him becoming one of the many mass casualties that are occurring among his countrymen in Kursk. This particular soldier wasn't executed before he entered Ukrainian hands, but he may as well have been. And that brings us to another question. Why are North Korean soldiers killing each other rather than risk being taken prisoner by Ukraine? The first of several answers to this question comes from the brutal tactics Putin has been employing during the Kursk counteroffensive. This operation, which is intended to push out the Ukrainian forces that invaded the Russian oblast back in August, has seen Putin rely on his human wave approach of simply throwing soldier after soldier at Ukrainian positions to soak up the ammo. Footage captured from the Kursk battlefield shows North Korean soldiers taking up massed positions while being provided with minimal protection from their Russian masters. Naturally, that makes the North Koreans vulnerable to airstrikes, and worse yet for these soldiers, their massed formations run contrary to how Russia is deploying its own troops. Where the North Koreans are forced to huddle together in large and easily targetable groups, their supposed Russian comrades operate in smaller teams that are far less exposed to Ukrainian firepower. Speaking on December 27th, White House National Security Council advisor John Kirby said that the North Korean troops were engaged in massed dismounted assaults. The use of the word dismounted suggests that the soldiers are being sent to assault Ukrainian positions on foot. Kirby also claims that the North Koreans are highly indoctrinated, meaning they will carry out their assaults even knowing that they will likely march to their deaths. Those tactics are leading to heavy casualties for North Korea, Kirby claims. But the soldiers' approach to Putin's brutal strategy also offers some insight into why there are now North Koreans executing each other on the battlefield. Putin is taking advantage of their indoctrination. He's able to send those North Korean soldiers to assault dangerous positions on foot because he knows the soldiers won't argue. They won't point out his tactical ineptitude. So heavily indoctrinated are they that they will even kill themselves to avoid falling into Ukrainian hands, both to protect their honor and to prevent Ukraine from proving that North Koreans are actually in the country. This approach makes the North Korean soldiers dangerous enemies for Ukraine. How are you supposed to counter an attacker who is so willing to die for their cause that they'll attack on foot simply to soak up your ammunition to clear the way for Russian forces on the back end? That's a question for which Ukraine needs to find an answer. However, indoctrination isn't the only powerful force compelling North Korean troops to either execute their own or commit suicide on the front lines. Those soldiers also know that failure to fulfill their duty of dying based on Putin's whims could lead to their families being targeted back home. Kirby said as much during his December 27th address. He noted that North Koreans were committing suicide and executing their own, likely out of fear of reprisal against their families in North Korea in the event they're captured. Don't underestimate the impact that placing pressure on families will have on these North Korean soldiers. Speaking to Voice of America back in November 2024, North Korean defector and former People's Army Lieutenant Kim Jong-ah says that the mothers of those who've been forced to send their children to Kursk can't even express their grief back home. North Korean mothers who sent their children to Russia must feel unimaginable pain, said Kim. They cannot even cry as hard as you want at home because there's no soundproof walls between houses. That comment reveals the extent of the surveillance state that North Korean President Kim Jong-un has created in the country. Mothers forced to send their children to Russia must hide their sorrow due to pressure placed upon them by the regime under which they live. For the North Korean soldiers in Kursk, that surveillance likely manifests in reports on their actions on the Russian battlefield. If a North Korean soldier doesn't perform as expected, meaning they don't die on Putin's command, the mothers back home who attempt to grieve publicly may face many more problems. It's coercion in its most basic form. And it shows us why so many North Koreans in Kursk choose suicide or execution ahead of being captured by Ukraine's forces. To be captured is to fail Putin, and that failure could lead to Kim Jong-un enacting revenge against those the soldier left behind. So it's better to die by your own comrade's hand than it is to give North Korea's leader an excuse to target your family. Now we have two reasons why North Koreans are executing each other in Kursk. The soldiers are so heavily indoctrinated thanks to their time serving in North Korea's People's Army that many believe it's their duty to die on the battlefield. That's why they'll assault Ukrainian positions on foot, knowing they have no chance of winning. They're willing to die rather than be captured. But accompanying that indoctrination is a terrible form of coercion. Every North Korean soldier in Kursk knows that they're being watched. Even if they don't feel duty-bound to die in Putin's war, they'll still do it because they want to protect their loved ones back home. If that means killing yourself or your comrades to prevent capture, then so be it. And that brings us to the third reason North Korean soldiers are killing each other in Ukraine. They know that they are expendable. The North Korean military is involved in the fighting, Zelensky says when reporting on what's happening in the Kursk region. They have many losses, a great deal, and we can see that the Russian military and the North Korean enforcers have no interest in the survival of these Koreans at all. That lack of care from command is another reason why some North Korean soldiers feel compelled to kill each other rather than be captured by Ukraine. They know, whether it's stated or not by their commanders, that their purpose in Kursk is to die. North Korean soldiers are left isolated in large groups and, as Kirby noted, are being pushed into assaults on foot. They are expendable. And the early numbers coming in from Kursk show exactly how little Russian and North Korean command cares for their rank-and-file North Korean soldiers. Zelensky claims that Ukraine has already killed or wounded 3,000 of the 12,000 North Korean soldiers in Kursk, meaning it will have taken out about a quarter of the forces in a matter of weeks. Kirby says the figure is a little more modest, stating that Ukraine has killed around 1,000 North Koreans. South Korea reports similar figures. Either way, it's a massive death rate that showcases the expendable nature of these troops. Again, the indoctrination comes into play here, with Kirby noting that the soldiers are pushing attacks even when it's clear that those attacks are futile. Imagine what seeing these figures would feel like as a North Korean being pushed into on-foot assaults in Kursk. The mere fact that you're going into fight with minimal protection tells you all you need to know about how command views you. It also tells you that command will be very unhappy if you are captured. You're expendable. Your role is to die to serve Putin's purpose. Allowing yourself to be captured is the very opposite of what you're supposed to do, and it simply can't be allowed. So if you or one of your comrades is at risk of being captured, it's far better to execute than it is to fall into Ukrainian hands. And as if to reinforce the North Korean soldiers' collective purpose in Kursk, the tactics they've been taught to defend themselves are practically useless. That's according to Ukraine's drone operators, who say that the evidence they've seen suggests that North Korean soldiers are clearly untrained in how to deal with unmanned aerial vehicles or UAVs. That lack of training has led to at least one instance of a North Korean soldier accidentally shooting a comrade while trying to destroy a drone that was filming them. Even when the North Koreans aren't purposefully executing one another, their lack of training is leading to some of them dying. The extent of their training deficiencies was revealed in a notebook recovered from the body of a North Korean soldier on the Kursk battlefield. Al Jazeera reports that the book contained a strategy for dealing with UAVs. When detecting a drone, you need to create a trio where the one who lures the drone keeps a distance of 7 meters, and those who shoot it 10 to 12 meters, read the notes. If the one who is luring stands still, the drone will also stop its movement. At this moment, the one who is shooting will eliminate the drone. It's a frankly ridiculous strategy that boils down to a North Korean soldier having to use themselves as bait so their comrades can tackle the drone. It's also a strategy that seems to rely on the drone stopping and simply hovering near the bait, rather than attacking or exploding. This hopeless tactic is indicative of what North Korea's soldiers face when heading into Kursk. They have no protection. They're fighting on foot and assembled in easily targetable masses. And as for the strategies they're being taught by Russia, these notes reveal that their tactics are to stand in front of deadly weapons and hope they don't get killed. This bait-and-shoot approach again highlights how expendable North Korea's soldiers are in Kursk. They simply don't matter to command, as long as they don't get captured. Knowing how expendable they are and how they're expected to follow through on orders no matter how ridiculous they seem, gives us another reason why North Koreans are executing each other on the battlefield. They're there to die. It almost doesn't matter who kills them. All of the reasons why North Korean soldiers are killing each other in Kursk hint at the factor that likely plays the biggest role in these executions. Russia wants to cover up its use of North Korean soldiers in Kursk. It's worth noting at this point that neither Russia nor North Korea have confirmed the deployment of North Korean soldiers in Russia, but it's clearly happening. There's more than enough independent evidence to show us that. But Putin and Kim are acting as though it isn't, with any acknowledgement being indirect and failing to expound on why the soldiers are really there. Putin wants to use this lack of acknowledgement as an intimidation tactic. In late October 2024, Russia's leader was asked about satellite images released by South Korean intelligence that showed North Korean soldiers heading to Russia. All Putin would say is, "Images are a serious thing. If there are images, they reflect something." What that something was is clear to the rest of the world now, even if Putin won't come out and say it. Still, Russia is trying to hide the fact that it has North Korean soldiers fighting in Kursk, and that desire to hide it has led to some truly horrific actions on the battlefield. Russia is burning the faces of dead North Korean soldiers to prevent them from being identified. That's according to Zelensky, who expanded on Russia's desire to keep the presence of North Korean soldiers in Kursk a secret on December 14, 2024. While they're being trained, they were even forbidden to show their faces. The Russian military tried to delete any video evidence of their presence, Ukraine's president claimed via his Telegram channel. And now, after the battle with our guys, the Russians are also trying to literally burn the faces of the dead North Korean soldiers. The claim was accompanied by a 30-second video in which a group of what appears to be Russian soldiers can be seen burning a corpse on a snow-covered hill. It's a terrifying cover-up, one in which Russia will go out of its way to destroy any evidence that North Korean troops are in Kursk. And it's this cover-up that reveals why the indoctrination, expendability, and threats against North Korean soldiers' families work so well for Russia. The soldiers Russia has received from President Kim know that they can't be caught. Being caught means they become physical evidence of North Korea's presence in Kursk. So North Korean troops execute their own in a vain effort to support Putin's illusion. They die by their own hands because they believe that executing one another means that the rest of the world will never know they were there. Of course, that's completely wrong. By this point, everybody knows that there are North Korean soldiers in Kursk. Russia can burn troops' faces, North Koreans can execute each other to hide the fact, but none of it works, with Putin's cover-up seeming to exist solely so he can create uncertainty within Ukraine's ranks. So we now have 4 reasons why North Korean soldiers are killing each other, and sometimes themselves, in Kursk. They're so heavily indoctrinated that they are willing to die for Putin's special military operation on Kim's orders. They're also treated and likely recognize themselves as expendable, meaning they already know they're only in Kursk to die. And even those who might consider rebelling against their indoctrination know that running from the situation would only lead to repercussions for their families. Thus, it's better to die in Kursk than to see their loved ones suffer back home. And all of this is underpinned by Putin's strange desire to keep the North Koreans' presence in Kursk a secret, despite the world knowing what's going on. But there may be one final reason why North Korean soldiers are executing each other rather than allowing Ukraine to capture them: Russian propaganda. Putin and his Kremlin cronies have likely been pumping North Korean soldiers full of information about what Ukraine will do to them if they're captured. Torture and slow death are in the soldiers' future, this propaganda might claim. And Putin would even be able to point to evidence gathered by the United Nations or UN as proof. In October 2024, the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights published a report in which it interviewed 205 Russian prisoners of war, or POWs. Of these 205 POWs, 104 said they had experienced torture or ill treatment during their time in captivity. These incidents typically took place in unofficial or transit locations, including garages, basements, or private houses. where the POWs were detained before being transferred to official facilities. This followed a similar report by the UN in November 2022, which said that there were credible allegations of the summary execution of Russian prisoners by their Ukrainian captors. These reports would suggest that Ukraine's hands aren't especially clean when it comes to its treatment of POWs. Putin likely uses that to his advantage when dealing with his North Korean soldiers. He's able to point to official UN reports to claim that any captured North Korean will face torture and possible execution by Ukraine. With a little embellishment, Russia could be making the very prospect of being captured seem like it's worse than death, leading to North Korean soldiers executing one another because they're afraid of what might happen to them if they're captured. If that's the case, the North Korean soldiers are truly stuck in an unwinnable situation in their own minds. Getting captured either means being tortured or putting your family and Putin's ambitions at risk, or both. Death may be preferable to both of these scenarios. So what should happen next? To Zelensky, the answer is pretty simple. The Korean nation should not lose its people in the battles of Europe, he says before pointing out that the likes of China may play a key role. If China is sincere in its statements that the war should not escalate, it must exert appropriate pressure on Pyongyang, claims Ukraine's president. Whether or not that happens remains to be seen. But until North Korea is out of Kursk, the odds are that we're going to see more of the country's soldiers committing suicide or executing comrades, all in service of Vladimir Putin's brutal special military operation. But what do you think about what the North Koreans are doing to each other in Kursk? Are these executions going to become more common as Putin's counteroffensive drags on? Will we start seeing North Koreans get captured as the war heads into its third year? Share your thoughts in the comments, and thank you for watching the video.